Now, in this chapter, we are going to look at using the virtual machine service for creating an Azure VM and Azure virtual machine. So if you want to host a machine on the cloud, you will use this service. This is kind of the bread and butter service when it comes to Azure because this is the most commonly used service. Normally, the first thing you would do on the Azure platform is to create a virtual machine. Now, when you create the virtual machine, there will be other resources that will be created along with the virtual machine. And we will go step by step in trying to understand all of these different resources. So here in the Azure platform, let me go on to the menu. Now we could create an Azure virtual machine in different ways. I could hit on create a resource here, or we can go on to the virtual machines link here itself. So let me hit on this link. And here we can create a virtual machine. So here, let me create a new virtual machine. Now I can just hide this menu so that we have a better view on the creation of the virtual machine itself. So again, you are presented with a wizard in which you will go through multiple screens or multiple steps in order to create your machine. Now, every resource on the Azure platform needs to be part of a subscription and a resource group. This is for any resource that you create on the platform. Remember that the subscription is used for billing purposes and the resource group is used for the logical grouping of your resources. So here I will choose my resource group. I'm going to choose demo GRP. We had created this resource group earlier on. Now we need to give a name for our virtual machine. So I'll just give it as demo VM. Next, we need to decide on a region. Where do we host our virtual machine? For now, I'll leave it in the North Europe location. Please note that I do have a separate chapter just to explain this region concept, because sometimes students do get confused on the region that you choose for a resource on the Azure platform. Because the common reasoning is this is available via the internet. This is on the cloud platform. Why should I be bothered about choosing a region, and why should I choose a region for the resource itself? Why should the virtual machine be located in a particular region? So I'll explain this a little bit later on. For now, I'll leave it in the North Europe location. In the availability options, there are some options in place. And again, we have chapters when it comes to availability zones and availability sets. For now, I'll leave it as no infrastructure redundancy required. Now, next is the image. What should be the underlying operating system for this virtual machine? Now here I can see I have Ubuntu Server, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I can also see that I have Windows Server 2019 and I have Windows 10. Now I'm going to be choosing Windows Server 2019 Data Center. The license for this particular server version will be embedded in the total cost for this virtual machine. Whereas for Windows 10, you need to first have a separate license before you can actually go ahead with the creation of the virtual machine based on Windows 10. Again, this is how the licensing model works. So I'm going to be choosing Windows Server 2019 Data Center. Now, next, an important point when it comes to the costing, and that is the size. Currently, it's allocating a size of D2S_V3, wherein we get 2 virtual CPUs and we get 8 gigs of memory. So remember, this is like having a machine in place. The machine needs to have a number of CPUs and it needs to have amount of RAM. Here 8 gigs means the amount of RAM that is allocated onto the machine. And here you can see the estimated cost per month. This is, remember, an estimated cost per month. Now, when it comes to a resource on the Azure platform, most of them actually get billed on an hourly basis. So here, if you create this virtual machine, it doesn't mean that you are going to be directly charged $145.27 at that point itself. No, you'll be charged based on the running cost of the virtual machine. So let's say you create this virtual machine right now, and after an hour, you delete this virtual machine. You will only be charged for that 1 hour, not for the entire month. If you go and click on See All Sizes, here you will see all of the different sizes that are available. So here for each size, you can see the amount of virtual CPUs, the amount of RAM that will be allocated, something known as data disk, etc. So these are all properties of the different sizes. And here in the last column, you can see the estimated cost per month. Now, just a quick note when it comes to the sizing for the VM. So if I go on to the page wherein you can create your Azure free account, and if I scroll down, so as part of the Azure free account, you get 750 hours of Windows virtual machine compute for free. But this is based on the B1S standard tier. So if I go on to B1S, that is here, you get one virtual CPU and only 1 gig of memory. So if I choose B1S for the entire month, I will not be charged for this compute machine if this is the only machine that I have in the B1S tier. But having one virtual CPU and 1 gig of RAM is actually quite less. You can probably spin up a Linux virtual machine and maybe install a very light workload on that machine itself. But if you are creating a Windows virtual machine, having just 1 gig of RAM in place and 1 virtual CPU will not be enough. You can create the Windows virtual machine, but when you try to log into the machine and if you try to install something on the machine, you probably won't be able to do so because of the low number of virtual CPUs and the gigs of RAM. Remember that Azure is actually giving this offering just for you to try something out to see how the Azure platform works. That's why it's giving this particular size for free. But then I am choosing a size wherein there is a higher number of virtual CPUs. So I am choosing this one, D2S_V3, wherein I get 2 virtual CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM. And the reason for this is because I want to install something on the server to explain further concepts when it comes to the exam for the virtual machine. So let me close this. So where are we? We are on the size. Now, if I just scroll down, here we have the administrator account details. So these are the details that you are going to be using to log into the virtual machine. Please keep a note of the username and password you are going to specify here, because I know a lot of students actually don't keep this in place and then in the end they will not be able to log into the virtual machine. So keep a note of the administrator account details. So here in the username, I'll mention a username for logging into the machine, and here we need to give a password. Now, if I give a very simple password, here you will see you will get an error because the password needs to match this following password restrictions. This is to help it make it much more secure. So I'm going to create my own password, ensuring that it meets the requirements. We have something known as inbound port rules. For now, I'll keep it as it is. So when it comes to the virtual machine, you can actually limit the traffic that is coming in or going out of the virtual machine. So at the moment, it's actually allowing traffic on port 3389, that's RDP. This will actually allow us to connect onto this virtual machine. And finally, if I scroll down, you have something known as the Azure hybrid benefit. So companies that actually already have existing licenses when it comes to Windows Server, if they have an enterprise-wide agreement, they can actually save on the licensing cost. So I said this entire cost, when you're looking at that $145 per month, this also encapsulates the licensing cost for Windows Server 2019. So you are paying not only for the compute, but you're paying for the licensing as well. But this is already embedded in the cost. So if you want to save on cost, a company that has already an enterprise-wide agreement with Microsoft can actually use their existing Windows Server license. And here they can confirm that they can apply this Azure hybrid benefit. It actually then reduces the amount that you actually pay per month. So at the moment, I am not checking this because I don't have that Azure hybrid benefit in place. Now, before I go on to the next screen, let me just scroll on top. I just want to give a note when it comes to the image. So here we have chosen the image as Windows Server 2019 Data Center. So what does this mean? So this means that there will be a template that will already have Windows Server 2019 already installed, and it will be used to create your virtual machine. See, in the past, if you had to have Windows Server in place or any sort of machine in place, so you would have a physical machine. Either you have your own workstation or you'll have a server. And if you want to install something, so you'll get the downloadable files or you'll get a CD and then you install Windows Server. Now this entire process of installation, configuration, etc. could take an hour. But when we create a resource using the Azure Virtual Machine Service, the entire machine will be up and running within just 4 to 5 minutes. So the reason why it takes such a short duration of time to create this virtual machine on the cloud is because there will be a snapshot, an image taken of an installed version of Windows Server 2019, and that will be used as the base for your virtual machine. It's so easy to actually create a machine out of an existing template. That's why you have that image in place. And there are various images that you can actually use in Azure for building your virtual machine. So let me go on next on to the disk. So let's mark an end onto this chapter. I want to break it into parts. We are covered the basics. That's one of the main things when it comes to the virtual machine.